Honored to be joined by the head coach of the Wisconsin Badgers, Luke Fickell. And coach, you had one of the latest spring practices, kind of by design, right? To make sure everybody knew they were all in or all out in terms of the transfer portal. But how did that go for you? And do you think the timing of it helped you kind of figure out what the roster is?
I believe so. I think twofold. Obviously in the Midwest, the weather is a little bit better later in the spring, so that's a part of it too. And then obviously for me, that date of the end of the portal, and for us to have our guys here where you're looking at them every single day, making sure you're keeping those connections, I think is really important. This ever changing landscape of college ball. You've always got to be on your toes. You've got to keep that relationship. You've got to keep those touch points and those opportunities to look guys in the face and sit down with them. And I think the most difficult time during what we're going through, I think the last couple of years in college ball, is when they're away, right? After a bowl game, they go home for a couple of weeks or something, and there's just so many people in their ears. And after spring ball and maybe the semester ends and they get an opportunity to get away for a couple days or weeks, and some more people in their ear. So, yeah, I think it was a little bit strategic to say, let's make sure we can keep these guys and we're around them and with them, and that way we can have those communications, at least face to face, if there's going to be some things that need to be done.
Well, and how different is it this year in year two, where I imagine your roster a heck of a lot better than you knew it coming out of spring year one?
No, it is, and I think that's what we wanted to find out in the spring. Some things we didn't do last year, whether it was spring or fall, and to find out before the actual game started. I thought that this spring we want a lot of live action. We want a lot of true scrimmage situations where we're going to find out who wants to play and who's on a daily basis is going to come out there to play. And I don't think we did a good enough job of that in year one, both in fall camp or in the spring. And so this was kind of important to us to have these guys and to make sure they understand what it's going to be like. So if this isn't what they want, then, you've got options. So twofold. It gave us a chance to evaluate and make sure they understand how this, culture and things are going to, continue to evolve. And then if this is what they really want.
I've read a lot of comments from you kind of between the end of the season and now, where you said something similar to that, where there were maybe guys who didn't quite understand what it was going to be like playing in your program. And, it was that a little bit of a surprise to you? Because obviously Wisconsin had been very successful for the most part coming into when you got hired.
Yeah, I think anytime there's a change, there's just different ways of doing things. And, you most importantly, you take those guys that have been here for 4 and 5 years, and they do get into a routine. It's not wrong. It's not bad. It's just different. And embracing the things that are different, I think, are what's difficult. And it's more difficult on the older guys. And we kind of had an older team. We kind of had to have, those older guys that, had to have great years and had to buy in. And I think when some of the adversity hit, that's where we ran into some issues. And it doesn't mean, like I said, it's not that it was bad before. It's just when things are different, how you practice, the expectations you might have, it's not easiest on those guys.
Well, I was going through when you took over at Cincinnati, and obviously that was a roster rebuild that you guys had to undergo, probably more so than what you're dealing at Wisconsin. But the shift from year one to year two was pretty dramatic, 4-8 to 11-2. I went back and looked at that first cycle recruiting class you signed, and there's a bunch of starters from that team that made the playoff a few years later.
Yeah, and yes, I would love to say that you're going to have that kind of transition, but there's things got to kind of fall in line, and for us they really did. We had some key players, whether they were great players as young guys, they were great culture guys, they were great guys that helped us build the things that we wanted to be able to do on a daily basis, whether it was the Derek Force of the world or the Kobe Bryants of the world or the there's a bunch of those kind of guys that really helped us get to where we were. And that it takes that. And whether they're automatic wins that, it's a lot easier to see when you win, but there's a lot of things that have to go on as you develop and work and kind of formulate some cultural changes, that you have to have a lot of buy-in. And there's some specific things that happen in that year 1 to year 2 at Cincy that gave us that opportunity.
So now that the world's changed and you have NIL and you have the players have the ability to hop into the portal basically whenever they want to, does it change what you look for in a player in terms of mentality? Because I feel like with you, whether it was at Ohio State or at Cincinnati, the people you were looking for, the guys that you would bring in, they had a certain mentality to them. They fit a certain mold culturally. Do you have to change that, or is that still the type of person you're looking for?
Well, to be honest with you, that's one of the things that really made this an enticing situation. I didn't know for sure, right? I mean, you're from the outside looking in at what a culture at, different places really are if you're not really embedded in them. And, knowing Wisconsin from playing against them and coaching against them and recruiting against them, it was one of the things that kind of, for me, was a big deal. Like, I think this is a place where you can go and you can still kind of truly recruit those types of kids, even though this landscape is changing, and be successful with them. And that's what I've been, I think, happiest as this NIL world continues to evolve, is that where we are right now, where we are going to continue to push to be, I think you can recruit those types of guys, yes, taking care of them, but the traditional types of things, the traditional types of people that you can still win and win championships with. I think you can't do that every place. I think you got to get into the transactional world in some of the different places and based on the type of kids that you need to be successful. But I don't think we have to do that here.
Well, and that was my next question, is because I was at the ACC spring meetings. I asked several coaches the same thing. Like, how do you tell a person in this day and age, you want them, you think they're a really good player. This is a player out of high school. You want them. You think they can be a really good player, but they do need to develop. They will need probably a few years before they're fully realized. Is that a harder conversation now?
Yeah, I don't know that you have that in the recruiting. Hey, by the way, it's going to be 2 years before you you have a chance to see your potential. But I think that when you're dealing with people with a little bit more, self-awareness, I do think they recognize that. But it is different for each guy, right? I mean, I'll be honest with you, Ahmad Gardner-Sauce is a kid that everybody always talks about that we had at Cincinnati. And I was the first guy that said, well, he won't play for 2 years. He's just so skinny. And, maybe in 2 years, he'll get strong enough and fast enough to play. And he comes in and obviously plays right away. And so you don't know for sure. But you do need to have those kinds of guys that understand, like, where I am now and where I'm going to be in 2-3 years is going to be completely different. And if they're willing to work, you might not tell them that, but you're kind of reading that in all the recruiting process when you're sitting there with their families. If it becomes all about the transaction, it's probably not someone we think is going to be real successful within the program. If they've got a little bit more self-awareness of what this thing's going to really be like, you believe you've got a better chance to really be a guy that you can develop over the next 3-4 years.
It's so funny that you mentioned Sauce as a recruit, because as I was researching your recruiting classes through the time at Cincinnati, the picture that pops up of Sauce on the recruiting websites from high school, he looks like he was in elementary school. So I know exactly what you're talking about when you said this guy's going to need a few years.
There's no doubt. I mean, until we actually put him in the game and he picked sixth at about the sixth play he was in there, like, maybe I was wrong. But those are things you don't know about people, right? I mean, there's an instinctual, talent that you don't always know. And, the competitive spirit you don't always know. And those are two things that were more surprising as we got to know that kid in particular, that we saw once he actually went in the football game.
Well, and one guy that you've got to know is Braden Locke, who's one of the guys competing for your quarterback job, and then Tyler Van Dyke, who comes in from Miami, and he's also competing. How do you handle that when you've got a returning guy, you bring in the new guy, and you say, we're gonna play this out here?
I think that's obviously in every level. The quarterback is a unique situation, but I think in college right now, the quarterback room is the most unique room. That's completely different even than 5 years ago, just because of the options that guys have and the nature of any of the quarterbacks at this level, they've always probably been the guy. And it's very difficult to not, be the guy and to sit behind somebody. So I think it's unique. I think it's tricky. I think you got to make sure that you're as honest and open and, forthright as you could possibly be so people will trust you. But for us, it's been a great battle. And we're fortunate that because we brought in Tyler Van Dyke, that Braden Locke didn't say, okay, well, you don't have enough confidence in me that I'm going to move on. He's got a great relationship obviously with Coach Longo, with me, believes in the things that we're doing. And he's willing to kind of battle through some of the things that he had to go through last year and even bring in another guy. So when you've got those kind of guys in your program, that's why you feel better, because guys that aren't always, looking for the grass being greener on the other side and are willing to compete and work and get better.
So you mentioned when adversity hit last year, and it seemed like when Tanner Mordecai got hurt, when Ches Malusi got hurt, that was when things really kind of buckled for you guys. How do you build a team that can handle if a key guy goes down?
Well, I think that you got to put yourself in a lot of those situations, and you got to, rely upon leadership. And I think as it got into it, and when I say leadership, I see myself as well. So I'm not, casting stones on anybody else, but that's when you really find out what your leadership and the strength of your, core culture really is. When you have those situations, does somebody else step up? Does somebody else take, kind of the horns? Does somebody else, rise above some of the things that they need to do and, maintain, the locker room really, really well. And that's where I think that we struggled. It's just the nature of what the leadership was and how they were able to handle it. We probably weren't strong enough. And like I said, I'm not pointing a finger at anybody other than myself to make sure that we were built for that and ready for that. And those are things you don't go into the fall camp and say, okay, now we're going to say this, our quarterback's out for the next 2 days to see how we handle it. Or our two running backs are out for the next 2 days. Let's see how we handle it. I mean, there's some things that, that you can't really replicate until you get into those situations. But that's when you find out what you're really made of.
Well, and you also know how these particular players will respond and where you need to improve that. But yeah, it does seem like year two for every coach, just understanding the dynamics of the roster and the place, it feels like that makes things a little bit easier.
Yeah, and I think I hope that you got a better grasp on, how guys handle things throughout a year, how guys handle things, because there's nothing like the season, the pressures that happen in the season, whether guys are playing or guys aren't playing, whether you win or you don't win. I mean, there's nothing like that you can create, and you try it as best you can in the off season. You try to do it as best you can, in spring football, but there's no way of really replicating, what that kind of pressure does to everybody within your program. And so that was important for us to kind of battle through that first thing. And I think one of the, we didn't win the last game, but I think the way, we were at least able to pull out a big overtime victory against, Nebraska, and then win the rivalry game and the last game of the year. And then, at least play, to a level where we've had a chance to win a ball game against a really good football team in the bowl game. And there's no, almost doesn't really count, but that's where I truly believe some of the leadership of what we've got now kind of took over those last few weeks of the season and then through the bowl that, give us that, okay, we battled through this adversity. I think it's in the long run, it's going to make us a hell of a lot better.
Well, in that LSU game, you'd had some time to reset. You'd have had some time to evaluate what had already happened, and you guys did. I mean, you look like a different team out there that day. So I would imagine that gave you some optimism for what was to come.
Yeah, and more so than even just the game, just how the preparation went, how the you don't have some of those guys that play in those games, and it's hard, but. In reality is a lot of those games, as you get to the bowl game, it's what you're looking at for the following year. And that's when we saw the different kind of group of guys that had to step up and be the leaders. And I thought they did a great job. They did a great job in the preparation. They did a great job, at making sure that they understood an expectation that you're going out to play and how you expect to play. And obviously it didn't work out and we didn't win, but you feel like, okay, we're going in the direction we need to go to continue to grow. We still got a long ways to go. But there were some things, even from the coaching standpoint to offense, defense, in all areas.
So I wanted to ask you before I let you go about one of your incoming freshmen, and I believe he's headed there in a couple of weeks. Dylan Johnson from Illinois, wrestler like you. Now Dylan's high school wrestling record was 143-1. How many times during his recruitment did you remind him that your high school record was 106-0?
Well, that was the last 3 years. So I did lose 3 times my freshman year, but we don't have to talk about those.
Okay.
Those aren't listed.
Okay.
So there was a couple, 3 of them in the freshman year. But who needs to talk about those, right? You just go with
just gloss over
record. them. No, he's a guy that unfortunately we didn't have in the spring, which you had a lot of your guys in the spring. He was obviously wrestling, so we didn't have a chance to get him in here. But it's funny that you asked that. I just literally talked to him today because he has not been here, and just kind of checking to see where he is and how he's been doing. And it's about 2 or 3 weeks from now he'll be here. But he's a guy that I think has a chance to come in and give us some depth. Just the nature of what he's been able to do on the mat, and he's not a guy that's going to come in and he's a 290-pound guy, 85, 90-pound guy that I think has a chance to kind of walk in the door here. But I used to always be able to use that excuse like, you don't get a shot at the title because you haven't won, enough state titles or state championships to get a shot at the title here. But I'm gonna have to change my tune because he's won 4 state titles, so he might be the guy that obviously has that shot.
Yeah, he might take the belt from you.
I'm not sure I want to do that. As we do get older, we figure out we only put ourselves in situations we really believe we can win, and I'm not sure that's a situation I want to be putting myself into.
No, I should add the one loss he had in high school, he did avenge. So that's you got to be careful. I'm with you. That's one of those Dylan, I'm sorry, feeling you got a little tweak in the back.
Yeah, we're not the same weight class anymore. He can't make the weight. He can't make the weight for the heavyweight. So I don't know that there's going to be an actual match. But no, he's the number 1 heavyweight in the country. He beat the other. He was number 3 and beat the top 2 guys, and it wasn't like it was something that's going to be handed to him. But he's transitioned to be a football guy now, and shouldn't have to worry about making that weight class. Not even the wrestling.
So if there's football players out there, especially linemen who are good wrestlers, they should be sending you their huddle clips, right?
I just had a cup of coffee with the wrestling coach, and they said, here's a 16-year-old guy that's 290 pounds. He's a big-time wrestler. We want to. I said, well, give me his number. I'm going to find out what he does football-wise, and we're definitely going to be reaching out to him to try to make some connections. There's a great translation, what I believe, not just leverage and things like that, but kind of more of a mentality that fits a lot of things that we want to do here.
Yeah, no double underhooks, lineman. That's not legal. But
there's another 4-time, going to be a 4-time state champ that's a really big recruit for us coming up this year too. So he might be one of the number 1 guys on my board. And maybe, yes, he's a great football, but maybe the wrestling background has a little bit to do with why he might be my number 1 guy.
That's the thing. If you want to, and that since you can't actually beat them on the mat anymore, you've got to put them, high up in the recruiting rankings.
Yeah. At least if I can bring this guy in who's be a 4-time and he can be a 4-time, we can kind of pit those 2 guys against each other and leave me out of the mix.
No, listen. It will go on in the locker room. That's going to be, as they get older, that's what's going to happen is the stud freshman who didn't wrestle is going to come in, and all the other older players and be like, hey, go try him. Yeah. And then like 10 seconds later, everybody's going to be laughing.
The good news for me is hopefully I don't have to mess with it. I just got to keep to be the ruler of my own home, because I've got kids that are starting to be decent wrestlers as little guys and older ones that are getting too big. I've kind of retired from making sure that I can rule the locker room with that. I can just talk it. Yeah, I got to be able to take care of the home.
I think you're still in the right weight class for that, so that's good.
I'll stick there.
Coach, we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, Andy. Good talking to you.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples On 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.